Hi, welcome to Khanijikar. Today we are going to discuss the properties of indifference curves. A higher indifference curve represents a higher level of satisfaction than a lower indifference curve. This is because due to basic economic assumption that more is always better. Just think about if someone were to ask you if you wanted a free piece of cake or an entire cake for free, what would you do? Who says no to cake, right? Every consumer attempts to move to a higher indifference curve provided his income and prices of goods permit him. In this diagram, we shall draw an indifference curve IC1 and IC curve 2. Indifference curve 1 and 2, the x-axis and y-axis represent the x goods and y goods. Here the point S and point R. Point S, now we shall understand, consumer prefers higher level of satisfaction by consuming lot of goods. So this curve shows the x1 y1 at point S represents the lowest satisfaction to consumer than point R. Point R represents consumer gets x2 of commodity X and y2 commodity of Y. It represents higher level of satisfaction to the consumer or greater satisfaction at point R to the consumer than point S. An indifference curve cannot be a vertical line or horizontal line. Can it be horizontal curve? No, it cannot be a horizontal curve also. That is because a horizontal curve indicates that one of the commodity is constant and the other commodity is changing. Therefore, even if you keep one commodity constant and go on increasing or decreasing the other commodity, then the indifference curve definition will be violated or it would be contrary to the principles of indifference curve analysis. In this diagram, we shall draw the two vertical line which is touches to the x-axis and horizontal axis of IC curve. At the point S, the consumer gets M1 more of commodity X without sacrificing any units of commodity Y. Therefore, the consumer prefers S to R. However, an indifference curve must have different combination giving the same level of satisfaction. Hence, the indifference curve cannot be a horizontal straight line. Due to the same reason, an indifference curve cannot be a vertical line also, and therefore we can see that it cannot be horizontal curve. It cannot be vertical curve. It cannot be positive curve, and the only thing left is that it can be a negative sloping curve, because that is what suits the definition of indifference curve. In this diagram, the IC curve is vertical. The point R represents greater combination of the commodities than the point S. The consumer gets N1 more commodities of Y without sacrificing any unit of X commodity. The consumer will obviously prefer R2 S. This is contradictory to the basic principles of indifference curve analysis. All the points on indifference curve must give same level of satisfaction. An indifference curve cannot be downward sloping straight line. If it is so, as shown in this diagram, then the marginal rate of substitution will remain constant. This is unrealistic. Indifference curve cannot be positively slope. So here we can ask one question: why cannot indifference curve slope upwards? It indicates that the consumer prefers more units of both x and y, which is not feasible in indifference curves analysis. In this diagram, the consumer is getting more unit of both commodities x and y. This is the violation of the assumptions of indifference curve analysis. Here every point shows consumer getting more units of x and y when he moves from point A to B and from B to C and so on. Consumer is getting more units of both the commodities x and y. An indifference curve must always be convex to the origin. This is an important property of indifference curves analysis, which we shall draw a line called the indifference curve, which should be convex to the origin. They are convex to the origin, it means bowed inward. This is equivalent to saying that as the consumer substitute commodity x for commodity y, the marginal rate of substitution diminishes of x for y along an indifference curve, good x and good y. In this diagram, as the consumer moves from point A, B, C, D, the willingness to substitute goods x for y, x for good y diminishes. This means that as the amount of good x is increased by equal amounts, that of good y diminishes by smaller amounts. The marginal rate of substitution of x for y is the quantity of good that the consumer is willing to give up to gain a marginal unit of good x. The slope of IC curve is negative. It is convex to the origin. If it is concave to the origin, the rate of substitution will be increasing. This is the unrealistic. As the stock of a commodity falls, our preference for the remaining unit must increase. The marginal rate of substitution must always diminish. Such condition is satisfied only when indifference curve is convex to the origin. And indifference curves are downward sloping from left to right. An indifference curve has a negative slope, which is already discussed. The slope of an indifference curve shows the rate of substitution between two goods, that is the rate at which an individual is willing to give up some quantity of good y to get more good x. The reason underlying this property is that if the consumer has to stay at the same level of satisfaction, the quantity of one commodity must decrease when the quantity of the other commodity increase. It is clearly explained in this diagram. We can see that when x1 amount of commodity x was consumed, y3 amount of commodity y also consumed. When the consumer increased the consumption of commodity x to x2, the amount of commodity y falls from y3 to y2 and so on. And in this way, the curve is downward sloping from left to right. It means the consumer is having only commodity x or commodity y, which is not feasible under indifference curve analysis. Indifference curve cannot intersect each other. The indifference curve cannot intersect each other. It is because at the point of tangency, the higher curve will give as much as of the two commodities as is given by the lower indifference curve. This is absurd and impossible. This diagram, two indifference curve IC1 and IC2 cut each other at point A. Thus the point A reflects equal level of satisfaction from the two different indifference curves, which is unrealistic according to assumption.